see Bitcoin playing, and what kind of shifts do you see coming?
So I think part of understanding how we got to this situation with the petrodollar system and the euro-dollar system comes down to understanding what are the properties of good money. And so prior to the system, there was gold, and it checked a lot of boxes for good money. It was scarce and had all the properties that many people here know, but it had weaknesses in terms of portability and auditability, verification, those types of shortcomings. And so despite the fact that it was good at holding its value long term, the fiat system could grow around it out of convenience, right? And so it's easy to centralize and easy to introduce through military force and diplomatic deals, fiat currencies that can go around it. But even that system, for decades now, the problem there is that you also lack good verification. So a common problem throughout the whole euro-dollar, petrodollar market is that it's very hard to track offshore dollars. They're very opaque. And so because this is not a very auditable system, it's shortcomings with the money itself. And then in addition, because the money constantly devalues, there's a very strong incentive to take out debt on it and then use that as leverage. And so you have a system that's not auditable or not very auditable and then encourages more and more debt accumulation. And so we find ourselves in the situation that we're at now. And so Bitcoin represents, a hope that there's maybe is a money that is good enough, that basically it checks more of the boxes that gold was not fully able to check. So you have the same type of scarcity, but then you also have better portability, better divisibility, better verification. And we're 13 years into this monetization process. And one of the most bullish things about Bitcoin is that there are pools of capital that can't even realistically buy it until it gets bigger. And that was the case, 5 years ago. Corporations, pensions, insurance companies, Bitcoin was too small, too volatile, too risky for them to even really look at. But when it becomes a multi-$100 billion asset, suddenly those large pools of capital can just start looking at it and say, do we want 1% positions? Do we want 5% positions in it out of our portfolio? And when you get even bigger than we are now, right, then you can start looking at the sovereign level. And they can start looking at it as a reserve asset and see how it compares to their other ones. How does it compare in terms of their ability to self-custody it? It's got, censorship-resistant payment rails built into it, in addition to, in the long run, better scarcity than gold. And so if it continues to grow into that and keeps having that Lindy effect build up, I don't see why it wouldn't eventually be part of a number of countries' reserve assets.
I want to amplify that point real quick.
Yeah, for sure, go.
The price of Bitcoin relative to the US dollar really does matter. And the reason why it matters is because let's say the market value of all the Bitcoin in the world is 10 trillion instead of 1 trillion, plus or minus. That's when you start to have a situation where the liquidity of Bitcoin for large institutions, for governments, for Deutsche Bank, for a country, they can start to buy and sell Bitcoin at scale in a way that's competitive with the way that today they can buy and sell treasury bonds at scale. What do I mean by that? That means if I want to buy $300 million of Bitcoin, I can do so without affecting the market price, right? That's what liquidity is. And the ability to do that at scale improves as the value of Bitcoin improves. So it becomes this virtuous cycle where if some countries start to adopt Bitcoin as part of their balance sheet, the price of Bitcoin goes up, that means the liquidity goes up, that means more governments can use it as a reserve asset on their balance sheet, and it's a virtuous cycle. So that is a really important part of the evolution of this market.
Hello, and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel, and big money is flowing into Bitcoin and will continue to flow into Bitcoin. We are short term back above 40k, but still sideways. We don't care yet. So I mentioned that big money is going to flow into Bitcoin, and the question here is, did a second nation just make Bitcoin legal tender? And the answer is yes. The Central African Bank Republic has become the first country in Africa and the second globally to make Bitcoin legal tender. CZ has tweeted about this. Central African Republic adopts Bitcoin. So we are in the process of seeing enormous money flowing into Bitcoin, and it will continue to flow into Bitcoin as it does. And as you just saw in the clip, the more money that flows into Bitcoin, the more it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, and the more that the liquidity increases and the more trillions we add to the market cap, the more likely that sovereign wealth funds can step in, and insurance companies and so on and so forth can continue to add this asset to their reserves. Grayscale is making a fresh push for SEC approval to become a Bitcoin ETF, and this is of course a spot Bitcoin ETF, the first of its kind, which means it is Bitcoin settled, not cash settled. The good news here is the SEC will likely have to decide on the Grayscale ETF application by July, so we are only a few months out now. And as I think I've covered on this channel before, Grayscale's CEO actually threatened a lawsuit against the SEC if they reject the spot Bitcoin ETF application. So are we finally going to get a spot Bitcoin ETF that will enable us to see enormous capital inflows into the Bitcoin market and start to increase its liquidity to that of a global reserve asset. We have also had this from the Bitcoin Core releases an update which potentially is going to support the Apple M1 family of chips. So the Bitcoin Core client quietly just released a final version to some of the source code update, and on the GitHub repo somebody spotted that they'd added a Mac OS ARM build which will enable natively supporting Apple Silicon M1 family chips. This was picked up in Mandarin on Twitter and somebody translated it. So this is the gent that spotted this GitHub repo and the ARM build. And so this would imply that we are about to see Apple potentially integrate perhaps the Lightning Network or Bitcoin into Apple Pay. This would of course be enormous. This would be huge news. People would be able to spend Bitcoin on the Lightning Network as easily as they can pay for something using Apple Pay. Apple was in the pockets of an enormous number of people worldwide, so this will be enormous for Bitcoin as well. I remember seeing this quite a while ago, this is December of 21, that if Apple were to operate as a Bitcoin exchange, they'll let you buy Bitcoin directly from the Apple wallet using the app and then pay for it using Apple Pay. So it actually would be a smart business move for Apple. They could slurp up fees non-stop, and then they could pocket those fees to put them onto their balance sheet and actually hold a hard form of money to fight against the inflation, against their cash balance. So I would think that we are likely going to see Apple following the footsteps of Tesla and start to add large chunks of Bitcoin to its reserves as the liquidity is increasing, and over time we will likely see more and more companies do the same thing. That's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you found value here, please drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, share this around. I do believe we're about to see enormous capital flows into Bitcoin, and I will continue to update as and when I find things. So until next time, take care. Bye bye.
Bye.